Gonna do this. Welcome to the debrief. It is the Bern 2023 halftime show. I'm Tyler Norton. I'll be singing a musical number. That is John Burgman. He'll be doing a dance routine, I think is what he said. So a one and a two and a it is the night after the men's and women's lead world championship was awarded. Bouldering happened over the last couple days, and of course there's now going to be a few days of rest, paraclimbing, speed climbing, and then the combined championship, if we want to call it that, the Olympic qualifying event next weekend. So we're probably going to forget everything that happened in the last couple of days by the time we record the actual World Championship debrief. So we thought, hey, let's do a quick episode while it's all fresh. See how we're feeling about this. You and I haven't actually talked at all in the last couple of days because I think we both thought we were each busy.
Yeah, I did not want to text you as it was going on because I didn't want to spoil anything. I will say, before we get going, I have a question for you. What am I going to need for this debrief? Because I brought both just in case. Am I going to need a chalk bag or am I going to need a damp washcloth here? Which one? Or should I just bring them both? Because that's
the king of prop humor. Or are you joking?
It's going to be the norm. Bring them both.
It's just what, and chalk bag, chalk pot, water bottle, damp cloth. The whole deal, man.
Pretty soon, competitors are going to be coming out with big wheelbarrows full of all sorts of stuff.
God, I hope not. Bringing out the fans.
No, back to your point. We have not talked at all. I don't know what you've thought of this event. You don't know what I've thought of this event. So this is totally off the cuff here.
And of course, you haven't been in the Discord to hear the snide jokes that I've been making about this or that. So it's fresh. Let's just start right off. I just want to hand it to you. Like, where do you want to start? Like, I was kind of thinking we could do like a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. Broadly try and cover a lot of topics in a short period of time, but when it's just you and I chatting, it usually goes pretty long, so we'll just see what happens.
Well, I kind of was thinking we didn't do headlines and winners and losers for this little debrief that we're having here, but I did think in my head, what would my headline be so far? So maybe that's a good place to start. My headline is the event that was the event, meaning the World Championships, the event that was supposed to give us all the answers ends up so far giving us a lot of excitement, but not a lot of answers.
Are we talking about like that? I feel like you must be talking about Janja and I specifically, because that is the question that has lingered since the end of last year.
I'm talking about it all. Actually, let me go into it a little bit. It kind of makes, those memes that's like you had one job, right? You had one job and you couldn't even do that. Like the World Championships, the one job is to give us definitively who is the best in the world for each discipline. That is the main job of the World Championships. Who is the best boulderer, male boulderer in the world? Is it Mickael?
I disagree with the premise, man. I completely disagree with I wish that is the world that we lived in, where World Championships had some kind of magical power, or was just like a better format or a more exclusive list of invitees where it could feel like robust enough to be like, yeah, the only people that can win this are the best. But it's not that. The World Championships is a World Cup with just like a little extra glitter, like just a pocket full of glitter like thrown on it. It's just a World Cup. That's all it is.
Yeah, you say that, but statistically, Mickael Mawem would beg to differ because he hasn't made a World Cup final since 2018, and yet here he is winning the World Championships.
That's what I'm saying, though, I think I don't come to the World Championships for answers. I wish the storylines were more accurate, more romantic, more like conclusive. Shauna said, I think it was it in Mickael's interview where she said, you are the best climber in the world or something. I don't know. I tried to do an accent too. Let's pretend that never happened. But it's just not that. It's simply not that. And we've got plenty of flukes, plenty of, second placers, second tier athletes winning World Championships. It says it just isn't. And my favorite World Championships are the ones where the best climber wins or we get some kind of answer, right? But this is not that. It's just not what we're going to get.
It's definitely not. I think we have had, I would argue, more flukes than definitive answers, maybe. We can kind of get into each discipline individually. I think just for starters, to throw it out there, I think really the only definitive, this person is the best in the world, and these World Championships showcased that, or determined that. The only real example of that has been the women's boulder discipline, and I think everything else
It's certainly the most decisive. Yeah.
Yeah, everything else has been just really fluky, and it's really hard to contextualize and talk about because there's just a lot of randomness, and we'll get into that too. It'll be fun to talk about.
Well, let's start from the top then. Let's the first one I'll ask you for your thumbs up or your thumbs down is Mickael Mawem and the men's bouldering world championship. Thumbs up, thumbs down. How did it leave you feeling?
Well,
I'm surprised you're having to think about it, man. I feel like that was one of the most emotional rounds of competition I've watched in a long time.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have that take. I came away from it not necessarily. I know on commentary, Matt Groom was like, "Oh, some people are saying this was the best final round in championship history." I don't know. Look, nothing should be taken away from Mickael. Awesome performance, and it's really cool that he wins because he is one of those veterans that, you know, the old school fans have known him for a long time, have watched him for a long time. Kind of like when we were talking about Jain Kim's win earlier in this season, right? They're not actually that much different in age. So that was really cool, and all credit to Mickael. But I guess my analysis of it, or my lack of throwing these accolades, it's the best we've ever seen, this best final round. I'm like, okay, how much of this was Mickael winning versus Serrato losing? Because it really felt like through the first two boulders, Serrato he had his destiny in his own hands. He was leading after the first boulder, he was leading after the second boulder, and then he just gets shot down on that trot on the volumes to the jumpy press. It actually wasn't even the press that seemed
Japanese climbers notoriously not known for dynamic movement. You know, he just could not figure out that left to right run and jump. It's just not what they train, apparently. You know,
it was the left to right. It was the jump or the run and jump where he was trotting and landing on the volume that took him more than 3 minutes, I think, or something like that. He finally got into that press with 45 seconds left or something like that.
And then faced in, if I remember right, his actual attempt on, So here's what I want to bring up. I think I understand where you're coming from is it was kind of like Serrato's to lose, Serrato's to win, Serrato's to lose, and he kind of tossed it, right? But and I'm thinking about this through the lens that I have, where I've looked back at all of these previous world championships, and the top line that you take from a world championships is who came first, who came second, who came third, and you could kind of paint a picture of, okay, what was the nature of this world championships, what was the storyline, and you sort of base it off of the podium. So, you know, when we talk about Petra Klinger's world championship as being very fluky, there's very little actual context around that aside from the fact that we know she only ever won a single World Cup in her life, right? Aside from that World Championships. Or you think about Mel Sandoz in 2012 Paris, also had never won anything in her life and manages to win that World Championship. And so I think of them just as flukes with not much extra context. So for this one, I am going to do a little video essay for future Tylers saying, here's what you need to know to understand Mickael's win and what made it good, what made it bad. And here's the biggest thing is, Serrato was absolutely the favorite coming out of semifinals, right? The only person to top all four boulders in semis, and one of those boulders, he was the only one to top it. It was nails hard, and he crushed it. No reason to think he's not the best going into finals. But Mickael was right up there with all the other guys that had 3 tops and 4 zones, right? Super legit scores, but he was just one among the crowd. And honestly, him getting to semifinals was oh, wow, good for him. That's a great day for Mickael, right? You know, a lot of the times he doesn't make semis, a lot of the times he does, but that's usually where it ends. So when he goes to finals, you're like, wow, this is some exceptional stuff going into finals in second place. That's real legit, right? And of course, when we get to finals, you're totally right. The storyline kept going. Serrato is the one who's supposed to win this comp. He's taking that momentum. He is crushing these first 2 boulders, but you're also noticing, oh, wow, Mickael's actually doing a great job on these too. Most of the other guys, the Mejdis and the whoever else was in the comp that I've forgotten already, they've only topped. Do-Hyun Lee, yeah, absolutely came third, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they only topped one or the other. And so Mickael stayed as this steady factor. And then boulder number 3, of course, is where it all falls apart. Mickael manages to send the thing. And of course, Serrato doesn't. And here's what should have set alarm bells off in everybody's head was the hype that was going into that fourth boulder, which had, if depending on how much you knew going into it from Instagram or from the commentary, you may have become aware that Boulder 4 had like a little something up its sleeve, right? Matt was intimating at it. The route setters had kind of like thrown little breadcrumbs with that one hold in semifinals saying, hey, we've got something special in store that you've never seen before. And anytime you hear that, anytime route setters are bragging about doing something cool, the chance that that boulder is going to be absolutely worthless for separation is through the roof, man. And so the second Mickael tops it and Serrato doesn't top boulder number 3, you're just thinking this could actually be the final score of the comp. And that's pretty much what happened, right? Somehow Nikolai Uznik, the only guy to top boulder 4, first one out, maybe it had something to do with friction, I don't know yet, but that boulder was completely useless in separation, and Serrato drops all the way out of consideration for the podium. And I think that's what people are going to see that podium. They're going to say, wow, Mickael first, Mejdi second, Boulder Lead third. They're not going to ever realize that the actual story the whole time was Serrato and Raku. He was the favorite from the start. He threw it all away. Mickael stayed consistent and topped all the things he had to, did it better than everybody else. And this was his World Cup, World Championship. This was all him. I'm very happy with this storyline.
Yeah, but I am too, but you kind of are proving my point that it's two sides of the same coin. Flip it one way and it's like this was Mickael winning. Flip it the other way and it's like, oh, this is Serrato looking dominant in the semis, looking dominant in the first half of the final, and then just kind of flubbing it. And
I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with the best climbers flubbing it. Like, that's cool with me, right? I don't think, like, all of those boulders, I think, were legitimate boulders aside from problem number 4, which, if you want to have debates about, is fine. But boulder number 3, Serrato not managing to do that move. If you want to trace a storyline of the route setting through this season, it is about that movement, right? It started off with the story of it being tried again by Flathold in that workshop video from a previous season. They break it out once or twice. I can't remember which comps it was. This movement has been in the works and has been in the consciousness for a while. And the fact that he can't even just nail a little like running move at the bottom, like he flubbed it, and that was a legit move. Mickael Mawem was able to finish it, right? Mickael doesn't have any set of strengths that the other top climbers don't have, right? If he's able to send this should be doable by the person we have flagged as the ultimate favorite, this new prodigy, this incredible rookie. So I don't see it as like an unreasonable fluke to me.
I don't look at it like it was a bad final. The fact that there is this case of one person having it in his destiny and then just like totally losing it as opposed to the other person winning, because there is kind of this wishy-washy, you could look at it from 3 different corners. That's kind of why I'm reluctant when everybody is saying like, oh, this is the greatest final ever. I don't know.
So I guess my question is, what are you saying makes it not a great final? The fact that the favorite didn't win it?
The fact that the favorite, that's a good question. I think the fact that, I guess I don't think that Mickael, I don't know. That's a good question. There's probably, I just wasn't like, I don't know. Emotionally, I was invested in it. Certainly, like I was very excited as I was watching, but then I came away being like, yeah, that was a good final. Whereas I think some other people came away being like, holy smokes, this is the best final we've ever seen. And I don't get it. I don't know. I guess different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like we talked about, like World Championships, if it is something where we want to give a prize to somebody who we think is one of the greats of today, this was not that final, right?
Here's maybe part of the reason why I have kind of a like complicated feelings about this, because this really this throws a wrench, I think, in how we talk about Mickael's performative legacy, similarly to how we talk about, how you said, Petra Klingler's performative legacy. I'm glad you mentioned her, because actually their careers, let's imagine they both stop competing today, right now, and whatever they have done is all that they will ever do on the circuit. Mm-hmm. You have 2 competitors, Petra and Mickael, both of whom now have a world championship win in bouldering. both of whom are Olympians, and yet neither of them have ever been much of a consistent force of nature on the World Cup circuit. I mean, if anything, you have to give the nod to Petra there, because she actually won a World Cup. The 2015 Haiyang one, I think, was the one she won.
That sounds right, yeah.
So it's like, how do you... Yeah, like, and we've had this kind of conversation on mic and off mic about how do we assess Petra's career. I think we now can think that same way about how do we assess Mickael's career, because is he an all-time great? No. Again, assuming he stops now, is he a great? No. Is he like distant World Cup finalist? No. World champion? Yes. Like, it's almost like with him and Petra, these world championships are just these anomalies, which goes back to what you were saying about how this is just another World Cup. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, but it's kind of not, because you see people shining at the World Championships that don't really shine in World Cups. We haven't seen Petra shine on the World Cup stage for a number of years. And Mickael, same thing, 2018, I think. So it's like, you know what, 5 years ago?
That's why I say it's like a World Cup, is the chance of a fluke of a novel win at a World Championships is equally as big as it is at a World Cup, right? Like, this format isn't any more rigorous to like, you know, weed out the stragglers or anything. It's just, if you do well in 3 rounds, you still get to win the thing, whether it's a World Cup or World Championship. It's the exact same process pretty much, and he gets it. So yeah, I thought it was a very satisfying round. I had a great time watching it, just because you could slowly see that build up of Mickael's potential, and then all of a sudden it's released at the end. I thought the men's was a huge thumbs up for me. It was a big deal, but
definitely stoked for Mickael, because I mean, you just have to wonder if he even expected this too, right? Like,
100% not. No, that's what makes it incredible, is you go in just hoping for the best, but I think he has his understanding. I think, though, after semifinals, he was probably feeling himself after seeing how he held up against those competitors on those boulders. And you're just like, you know, I'm going into finals. What else am I going to do except climb hard? Like, by the time he got to finals, he was probably like, well, let's do this. Like, but, and again, here's, you know, we did a quick little predictions thing in the Discord, and the question I always ask, because it's a great way to like tell what the consensus is around this field, is who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is going to get the silver, bronze? And those are interchangeable. Just like, tell me the 2 names you think are going to be on the podium aside from the winner. And then lastly, who is going to come in 6th place? Who's going to be at the bottom of the finals? And Mickael was 50% of all the guesses for coming in last place. It was him and Nikolai, nobody else, right? No one expected him to win the thing. Natalie Berry very kindly suggested he might make it into her podium, but it just kind of goes to show what the broad expectations is Mickael Mawem was not a factor, not just to win, but to podium. He was not a factor in the public consciousness, and I don't think he would have been himself either. He was there for the World Championship ranking points, and possibly on the best day he could imagine was to get top 3 in the combined finals, but no way did he come into this thinking, I'm going to be a Boulder World Champion.
Yeah, and I think if you're playing those the picks, you know, heading into it, if you are just looking at the statistics, you have to think, okay, Mickael, statistically speaking, doesn't usually make finals. So the fact that he's in finals, it kind of feels like, okay, but like his luck's going to run out, or luck, or whatever you want to call it. Like, yeah, he had a great semi, but like, this is the finals. He doesn't usually come this far. He's gotten farther than he usually does. So some Mejdi or Dohyun or somebody's going to kind of rise. And Mickael held him off. So all credit to him.
Let's move. What topic do you want to breach next? We don't have to go like in chronological order. We don't even have to cover everything. Like, we can just talk about what we want. But do you want to talk about holds? Do you want to talk about women?
Well, I did want to ask you what was more overhyped, the clear holds or the light show from the previous World Cups?
Definitely the light show, man. This was a legitimate, you know, like. So I was watching the men's final round at the front desk of the gym that I work at with some other staff, and there was a couple like members hanging around watching it too. And it was honestly just like, yo, is this something we have to like prepare for? Like, do we got to start talking about like do we need waterproof mats all of a sudden? Like what's going to be going on here? And it was really intriguing to watch something where you're like, if this does become a big thing, I am sitting here watching it for like this. This is the dumbest thing I'm ever going to say. This must have been what it felt like when people watched the first space shuttle, like, take off, must have been the first time, or not, or whatever somebody went into space, right? It was like, wow, I was here for this moment where mankind took the next step in climbing hold development and finally got rid of texture completely.
And you were here when Nikolai Uznik proved that it doesn't make an ounce of difference.
He's the future, man. He is ready for the meta of the future. He's ready for the true 21st century meta. No, like I think, I'm so frustrated that we've had these two kind of cool hold introductions this year that are functionally unique, but then they totally distract everybody and make it super confusing by not just changing the function, but also the form of them. So the first one was the ghost holds. That is the name of the holds that I already forget. Is it 360 or whatever Slovenian or illusion maybe? I can't remember, but it's those dual text holds where the texture is in like a limited area on the hold. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's even harder to see because they insist on doing the stylistic thing where they smear black plastic on it. Yeah. And it makes it freaking impossible to understand where the texture is unless you're in a really close camera shot, right? So the athletes can see it fine. And if there is a zoom in and there's enough chalk on the holds, the spectator can see it too. But when you zoom out on a problem, you got no idea where the texture is. I wish they didn't do that. Just pick a solid color. And then with just that one solid color, there should hopefully be enough contrast in the lighting to make it obvious, like where the texture is, right? So that was mistake number one. And then mistake number two is these. Flat Hold takes this leap to say, we're going to make some holds that have absolutely no texture on them. They're not the first ones to do it. In fact, these aren't even the first zero text holds that Flat Hold themselves have made. They've been selling at least one hold with zero texture on it for quite a few years. But again, by making it transparent, it totally distracts the viewer as to what's actually important about these holds, right? Everybody is suddenly like intrigued by like, oh, we can put lights behind them. Like, guys, it's going to be like a kilter wall. Wow. And of course, that's not the cool thing about these at all. The cool thing is that they're completely slick and it completely changes like how the friction is going to behave on them. So I wish we didn't do that by like, changing them up visually for no reason when the most important part is the function. I'm psyched about it. Like I've set boulders, and I haven't set for like 10 years, but I set boulders where you're grabbing like no text. It's a natural thing when you're a root setter. It's like, man, I got to make this harder. What if I just turn this dual text hold the other way? So they got to grab the slick side, right? And I think that's always been an intriguing thing that root setters have always messed around with. But recently, the two biggest things that make it a compelling option is one, we're always looking for ways to challenge climbers when we're always, climbers are always upping their level, and especially when we're trying to move away from some particular types of movement for reasons of danger or health. How do we make these big rails, these big slopers, how do we make them a bit more difficult without introducing really small crimps, right? But secondly is, with all of the holds that we're manufacturing now, the type of texture that we're using is so severe, and the type of movements that we're doing on them, these dynamic moves where your hands are being shredded and ripped against them, climber skin like cannot hold up. This is a shout out to Eddie Fout, because he's been barking up this tree for a real long time. And so here's a solution: is let's just remove the friction completely. And this means that hopefully climbers get to keep more skin for longer. They get to take that skin into the next round or into the next day, which is extra important right now during the combined era. So I love that stuff. I think that's awesome. How are climbers going to adapt to create more friction? As we saw in that little, the little 30 minutes or whatever, we saw those climbers on with water bottles, with rags, with liquid chalk, and not letting it dry. Like that's the question: is what is going to be the best way to deal with this? I got no idea. I hope whatever the answer is, it doesn't make a mess. I hope it doesn't make a mess in my gym. I hope I don't got to replace the mats. I'm very intrigued. I'm excited to see how it develops.
Yeah, amen to all that. I'm excited to see how it develops. Going back to your moon landing metaphor, like I want to
let's not drag that one too far. That was probably a little bit of a reach.
I want to see what happens when those holds are a factor on a route not in a paddle dyno sequence, because I think that the paddle dyno, you almost in that situation can, like, it, just by nature, you don't need as much texture, right? So because you're just kind of smacking, and you're kind of smacking downward. Let's put them on a route where they really are cruxy, and you really we got to see some people try to pinch them or try to do something on them other than just like use their momentum to keep going to the other one. I'm sure we'll get there. This was just like whatever beta, this is like version 1.0 or whatever. But I hope that we see him on the World Cup circuit, maybe, this season, next season, whatever. Let's use them. I like it. They add an X factor to the routes for sure.
My nightmare though is like the danger of dry firing, or like maybe dry firing is like not accurate if everybody's gonna have damp hands, but like I think it was Serrato that had one attempt on them where his hand blew off when he didn't think it was going to, and part of me does really worry about like, okay, what moves are we using these on? Like if you're trying to do like a crimp on a totally slick rail and then you blow off it, you can just shatter your fingers to bits. That kind of scare. Again, this is really like, let's see how this goes. Take it easy. Kind of brave to introduce it at a world championship. Like that's pretty ballsy. But yeah, let's see how it develops over a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I guess the counter to that would be like, look at the slab on what was it, women's 2 in the final, where they were launching up to it was like a double mono, yeah. But still they're kind of going dynamically to a mono, which by your sort of the same logic tells you that that's a really dangerous move.
Do people still call that spocking it? Like when you're going for I guess it's not spock if you're going for like peace fingers, but I know there were some holds where you had to like, go for the Vulcan thing or whatever that is.
Point is like, I mean, I guess there are plenty of moves that have kind of a risk factor to them. They just need smart route setting and used sparingly, I suppose.
Yeah. 100%. What's the next thing I want to talk about? We talked about men's bouldering. Let's just talk about the women's lead final next, because I think that's sure. And actually, you know what? I screen grabbed some comments from Eddie Falk in the Discord. He dropped them like a half hour ago, and I was like, yoink, gonna take those. We organized this stream like 20 minutes ago, so we did not have time to invite guests for this. But just first impressions on the women's final. Do you want to start? You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I have impressions, but maybe I'll piggyback off whatever you say.
To set the stage, a really hard women's semifinal that I thought was an extraordinary route considering the field we had, which let us see where all these climbers were at, and it put some separation between those top 4 or 5 climbers. I thought that was like A+, right? Mori is at the top of that field, unquestionable based on that performance. Janja Garnbret kind of gets caught up in a bit of a mistake and timing out at the same time. I feel like that's the first time I've seen Janja Garnbret intentionally just let go of a wall and say, nothing I can do here. That was really striking. But
you're talking about semis here.
Semifinals, yeah. Yes. But I wish they had switched the routes around, man. I don't know what else to say. Semifinals was an extraordinary semis, and it should have been the finals, because finals did nothing for the 2 climbers that sit for like a year now. This has been the buildup of the story, as we want to see Janja and I climb and lead routes side by side, see what actually happens. And of course, they both end up topping it. We go to countbacks. What a bummer.
You're reading my notes. That's exactly I wrote down the same thing. I wish they would have swapped the women's semi with the final and the semi. As Janja was climbing, well, another thing I wish they would have done too is I wish they would have taken that swinging Lachey dyno from the men's final and put it in the women's final, because
you hate Mori. You're a huge Mori hater, aren't you? Trying to add a dyno to this route? That's so cruel.
I might be. I'd like to point out that I predicted her to win the lead portion.
I'm wearing this, by the way, but yeah.
But I do, like, as I was watching Janja climb the women's route, I was and go to the top of it, the women's final. I mean, I was like looking, okay, where are the moves that are gonna really challenge Mori so we don't get 2 tops? Because I was thinking, like, don't let this end in 2 tops. And Janja gets to the head wall and keeps going, and I'm like, okay, where's something funky? Where not that it had to be dynamic, but just like, where was the coordination? Where was some? And it wasn't. And Janja topped the route. And I thought, oh gosh, I's gonna top this, because there's nothing in this route that I is not gonna be able to figure out and cruise through. And that's exactly what happened. And I was kind of bummed, because I think, I don't know, the route setter, I do wish maybe there was a little more cruxy, dynamic coordination, something in there.
Honestly, anything cruxy. Like,
Yeah.
and again, a crux for these two climbers is obviously a different level from the others, right? Like we saw the other women struggle in different parts, and how hard does a crux have to be for it to be effective versus, how hard is too hard and it ruins it just in the opposite direction? Like, great question, really hard one to answer, but I agree. Like for Janja and Janja got tested. It was very cool seeing her have to pick up the pace towards the end and climb faster than she probably wanted to, leave that rest sooner than she wanted to, but it just wasn't enough, right? A little bit harder, and you probably would have got Janja off the wall before that finish move.
A little bit harder at the head wall, a little bit, just throw in something, just coordination, dynamics, something to just kind of like throw their mental something. And like you said, I know it was a really hard route because if anything, we saw Cheon So, who usually looks so smooth. She just was all sorts of herky-jerky in that midsection. She never looked like she found
that's the most Midwest term I've ever heard you say. I've never heard herky-jerky in my life, dude.
She never looked like she found any flow, really, which is all credit to her because she ended up like just grinding out to the 47 plus. Still got the bronze medal, but I think the fact that she was really wrestling through it and wrestling to kind of settle in anywhere shows you how really hard the route was. But yeah, what a bust of a women's final, bust of a route, just ending with the last two competitors getting tops. That's no good. On top of that, it's Mori and Janja Garnbret, who we've had this now multi-season build to this World Championships, really. And we even had these plot lines with Mori like not participating in the last World Cups and so we're like, how is her fitness going to be? And then it ends up with them both topping. It just very, very anticlimactic. Yeah. And I kind of got the sense that everybody in the arena felt that way too. And the commentators felt that way because the way they spoke, Charlie and Matt and Shauna. I'm sorry, Matt and Shauna, the way they spoke about Mori winning, it just the I don't know, the timbre in their voice was not the same as they spoke about Mickael winning or Janja winning in Boulder. I think everybody was just kind of like, well, good for like stoked for her. But
it was one of the worst kind of wins in terms of storyline. And I don't mean to say that I think I shouldn't have won because I looked like a better climber through semis and through finals. Like, I think this was I's win. And that's where I want to actually bring up a quote. This is from Eddie Faulk, the circuit climbing, something he popped in the Discord this evening, assuming he woke up today and dropped this comment. I'll read it out. Damn, is it really that small? Is that how small? Let me just see if I can grow this thing a little bit. John, I'll read it so you don't have to read too far. Okay, so Ed says, okay, I'm going to call it I hate speed lead. And of course, Eddie is referring to climbs that force you to climb really fast to get to the top within a time frame, right? Rather than just difficulty being the crux. So Ed says, out of the last 4 lead world champs that Janja has done, she has topped the final 3 times. Only one of those 3 tops ended up being a win, okay? In all 3 cases, there were multiple tops. In 2016, Janja beat Anik on countback. She lost in 2018 to Jessie Pills based on time, and of course, losing to I technically on countback this year. But the fact that it went down to a top with very little time left is kind of what his point is. So Janja's topped the final route 3 times, and 2 of those times when she topped the final, she didn't actually win it, right? So Eddie says, so only once in 4 comps did we see a finals where the winner didn't top that Janja won. The others all went down to a rule book decision rather than just the person who tops wins, right? Just saying basically there's too many tops and speed as a decider is not very effective. And here's Eddie's point, which is kind of mirroring what I was saying. Do I think Janja would have more world titles if the routes were harder? Arguably, no. I think Anik would have won the one in Paris, and I probably would have had her here in 2023. But rulebook victories go against the spirit of the sport for me. And now the takeaway from that comment, I don't really want to talk about the fact that like, oh, what should the format be? Should we go back to like super finals? Should we like get rid of the time limit and make it much harder and allow for resting? What I think is interesting is Eddie brings up a good point, is that a bunch of Janja's world championship wins and losses, frankly, she was, well, particularly in the Anik performance in 2016, where Janja beat Anik in Paris, and the event that just happened here in Bern, where I beat her. She's not always the favorite, right? Like in a bunch of these points where the tiebreakers happened, like in this case particularly, Mori looked frankly better. Anik looked better in 2016. You can argue about Jessie in 2018. I would probably lean with Janja being better at that one, even though Jessie's the one that took the win. But I guess this is all just to say, like, this format is kind of brutal, but also just because somebody other than Janja won doesn't mean that's what I'm complaining about, right? I don't want to make it sound like Mori got an invalid win. It's a win by the rule book, and I think Mori at this competition was the better climber. But I am really frustrated that I and Janja aren't getting the chance to like showcase how much better they are than each other as often as we'd like.
Yeah, if we are getting now 2 years of build for these two competitors to finally face off, and on top of that, we're getting all these little subplots like Mori not being there for most of the competitions, and Janja Garnbret having an injury and taking time off and then coming back from the injury, and all of these ingredients for 2 years, and we finally get them together. Not to mention they do what they have to do in the qualification round. They do what they have to do in the semifinal round. They both make it to finals. They both make it to the very top of finals. This is, again, I kind of like broken record. 2 years in the making. I want this to be a knockout, drag down, like fight between the two of them on the wall with a definitive winner. We didn't get that. We didn't get anything close. We got like kind of the worst, which is like we got the beginning of that, but then they just both topped. It's like, wow, can't they just keep going? Like, let's just, just
drop them and start them back up the route again with the full pump. Just like keep on going. It's not over until you fall.
Have them come down and then start the men's route or something.
So I just want to like highlight that we've only seen Mori and Janja go head to head in a lead competition 4 times since Mori's breakout at the end of last year, right? So of course Mori won incredibly in Koper, Slovenia last season, and that was a clear win. She got like 5 holds further than Janja Garnbret in the final, and they were tight through the other rounds. And then of course we go to Edinburgh, and that was one of those events where again they both got to the top of the wall, if I remember right. Time being a factor. Did they time out or was it top of the wall? I think they both got to the top of the wall, and it was actually I can just look it up right here real quick. But again, so Mori won a count back in Edinburgh. Then previously this season in Innsbruck, Janja Garnbret gets a legitimate win, right? And now we're back to Bern, where it feels like, again, it's by like count back or time. So we've seen them 4 times. 2 of those events were like very unsatisfying competitions. In both cases, I took the win. But in the satisfying ones, Janja's got 1 and I's got 1. And so it's like, it's such a compelling story, and we just keep not getting the comps to actually see who's on top any given day.
Yeah, and I just keep going back to there's an easy way to solve this, which is to put in some crazier route setting to really test them, which is totally like people will jump on that and say, oh, like, well, you know, that like that if you throw in more dynamic movement and whatever, then you're favoring Janja or something, right? Like you said, like you joked, like you're anti Mori or whatever. But it's like, well, no, that's part of the game. Like, why can we have that in the men's route, but then not have it in this women's route where we are definitely gonna need some sort of special nugget to separate these two women. Like the solution, the key is throw in some coordination, dynamic moves to really test them and really see if they're separated, because clearly just having a route is not doing the job because they're both getting to the top.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
what other topics can we breach right now? We're at like 30 minutes.
Women's
minutes.
boulder. Let's talk about women's bouldering.
What is there to say? I mean, Janja Garnbret complete domination. Fans furious over the height discrepancy, dynamic movement evil.
Orion fans furious over the clock woes.
I think that worked out pretty well for her, honestly.
Did,
like that played out okay. She got the top the second she came back out.
She got the top, kind of made her a little even more of a crowd favorite. So yeah.
Well, let me just use this round as kind of a very good example of what separation can look like if we just make stuff hard enough, right? I think this was excellent. I think I've said this before. Janja Garnbret is the tier 1 boulderer. Natalia Grossman is tier 2, and everybody else is tier 3. Mori is not in that tier 3 yet, right? Like Oriane Bertone, Oriane Bertone, Brooke Rabatou, whoever else we want to add to this list, like Miho Nanaka, they're all fighting it out there. Mori is not consistent enough as a boulderer for her to be in that tier 3. And yeah, if you want to argue with Miho Nanaka being lower down, fair enough.
Putting Miho with
fair.
Brooke and Oriane,
totally fair.
Maybe years ago, I don't know now, but anyway.
But all I'm saying is that this final put a fucking ocean between Janja Garnbret and Natalia Grossman, and Janja Garnbret and Brooke Rabatou, and Janja Garnbret and Oriane Bertone, right? And that's the kind of distance we need to see if we're talking about the greatest climber of all time. Yeah, we should be able to find a gap, right? And if we're talking about Janja and Mori on lead, yeah, we should be able to find a gap between these two athletes. We got to make one, otherwise, like, there's no story. And they're both going to be unsatisfied. I don't think either of those two climbers would be satisfied with their route. Of course, Mori is satisfied with the win, but I think both of them want to either win or lose decisively, rather than feeling like, oh, I had more to give. Did she have more to give? Maybe I could have beaten her, right? So I thought this boulder final was effective. Was it the most exciting thing in the world after seeing the very exciting and emotional men's round? Probably not, but yeah.
It was funny because I would guess that maybe nobody outside of the French team was predicting Mickael to win the men's portion, and yet
there wasn't even anybody on the French team predicting him to win that, man. They would have been going for Mejdi at the very
yeah, that's true. I think if you had I don't know if you had like thrown into Chat GPT like who is going to win, what's the women's boulder podium going to be, and it crunched all these statistics, probably 99% of the time the answer that you would have gotten would have been Janja Garnbret number 1, Oriane and Brooke 2 and 3, or Brooke and Oriane, I think. And
maybe Natalia in there, depending on how she's feeling. Yeah.
Let's talk about Natalia's.
Do you want to? It's more painful for you than it is for me.
Well, I don't have a lot to say because I don't really know. I don't have any insider information. I did think it was interesting that I noted that in her bouldering round, every time in her bouldering final, every time she started another boulder, I thought Shauna Coxey, I should just say, I think Shauna's commentary has been excellent.
Legit.
Every time that Shauna would talk about Natalia's attempt, it was always about something mental. It was always about, she looked like she lacked confidence on that last slab move where she was jumping up to the Vulcan Spock mono. And then the next boulder, it's like, she didn't get that. Is she going to be able to? It looks like that failing to do that move is still in her head. It was all in her head. All Shauna's commentary was about how things are in her head, in Natalia's head. And I think once you heard that from Shauna, you started to kind of like read that in your in analysis and in observation of Natalia. And whether or not that's true, I don't know. But I think Shauna made it, it sounded like they were really good points, and then you start to watch Natalia and it's kind of like, gosh, it does seem like maybe her head something is going on. Maybe it's not just physical. There is something mental there. I thought Shauna was really right to point that out on like every bouldering attempt. And then you could carry that over to the lead round where she didn't make didn't even make semis, right?
Yeah, I'm really curious because Shauna and Natalia, I don't think ever shared a final together. Maybe there was one at a Vail at some point in like 2017, if I'm remembering something vaguely, or 19. Anyway, like since Natalia's really had her come up in 2021, of course, Shauna wasn't really around at that point. So they haven't gotten to know each other by sharing a lot of time in ISO, by having those, chats on the couch after they're done climbing. So if they do know each other, I honestly, I don't think they're probably that close. I imagine this is mostly like outsider analysis from Shauna's perspective, and maybe a little bit of hearsay through just like athletes talk about, climbing and talk about each other. I think, yeah, partially. I think on something like a slab, it's like yes and no. On a climb like that, there is so much doubt in your movement, right? And especially when that climb, the amount of work you have to do into dialing in those foot sequences and getting comfortable on that foot, getting comfortable on that little nib of a handhold. Yeah, I would, for a climb like that, I feel like it's half and half. Yeah, it's half mental, but it's also half physical. Like, do you just trust your body to do that? And in those kind of moves, I think it is a balance between the two. Like, it's not just psychological as in like believing in yourself. It's psychological as in like, do I think I have the foot stability to do this? Is my foot going to hold? Can I keep my hips in? Stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's interesting. But yeah, all around, and this is my same commentary for the men's for the U.S. men's team, is just like, they did not peak when they were expecting to. Like, unless they're pulling something out of the hat for next weekend and suddenly everybody lights up and Colin Duffy is, to the top and Natalia Grossman gets it all back, which I believe Natalia Grossman can do. Colin, I'm a little more scared about this year. But this, man, that first weekend did not go the way that they wanted to. And I feel like Natalia will probably give us a bit more of a revealing Instagram post when the whole comp is over and maybe explain, like, how did the travel go? Going back to America and then back to Europe after the last round of World Cups. How did that play out? Like, where was it all at? How much pressure was there on you this time around? Because again, it's her first Olympic cycle, right? She wasn't around to qualify for 2020. This is her first time where she's got all the pressure of being the USA's golden girl. She is the one that's supposed to bring him back some kind of Olympic medal. And how did that all play out in her head? I'm very, very curious.
I think we can finally analyze, especially the American men's squad, and we can finally say this season has been a disappointment, I think. Mm-hmm. And I say finally because anybody that's listened to all these debriefs, shout out to all those people, much appreciated. But anybody that's listened to all these debriefs knows that we've kind of danced around it, like, because the U.S. men haven't had good results overall. And we've said, like, yeah, okay, but let's put a placeholder there because it might all be part of this grand plan for the men to peak at the World Championships. And World Championships are still going on, so good stuff could still happen for the American men. But in the lead portion and in the boulder portion, I don't know. Like, they just, if that was the plan to just, like, doesn't matter what happens on the World Cup circuit, all that matters is, like, let's rock it to the top of the podiums for the World Championships. It didn't work out that way. This was we're singing quite a different tune than we were last year about the American men. And what will be really interesting going forward is to see what you and I were saying off mic before we pressed record, which is this just a year, a single year slump, or is this kind of the new normal? And maybe having the American men do really well in mass, that was the rarity. Like, that we kind of thought that the American men doing well, like, oh, this is like the dawn of a new American era, and they're just going to be consistently, finalists. No, maybe that was the rarity. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell as seasons go forward.
Well, one thing I've been looking at is the trio of big male lead names that showed up last year. So Jesse Grouper, Taisei Homa, and Luka Podachar, who was your podium for the lead World Cup last season. Where did those guys go, right? Like, for our top three guys of last year, they are nowhere, right? One or two of them making the occasional final, but they are absolutely eating it this season compared to last year. They're not on an upward trajectory at all. And so I'm looking back at last year and thinking, like, man, was all that success just because a bunch of the Olympic cycle guys just, didn't want to do last year? It was a rest year, but did they do that well because Jakob didn't show up and because Adam didn't show up? Like, is that how they managed to get up that high? Like, it's giving me all these second doubts around those guys. So Jesse Grouper is the one American in that group, right? And I'm thinking, like, oh, maybe it's that. But for the rest of them, like Colin Duffy, yeah, it does raise some questions about his 2022 season. I don't know what to say about it. Like, the whole thing is looking questionable.
And the devil's advocate to what you just said would be that it's not necessarily the fact that the Andras and the Olympians, the Jakob Schubert and stuff, weren't as much of a in the scene last year as this year. There have been some injuries on the American side. Colin Duffy, he's you can see his ankle is taped up as we speak at these World Championships. Apparently, he sprained his ankle. Jesse Grouper, during like team trials leading into this World Cup season, was dealing with a nasty knee injury. He was wearing a big brace when he was doing the American competitions, the domestic scene. So there are probably multiple factors at play that have gone into these results not being what I think we're expecting heading into this season. I'm not saying there aren't reasons for this dip, but it's a dip nonetheless, and I think we have to comment on it here.
Yeah, I'm looking up because you mentioned those about Colin and Jesse, and I'm wondering if the same thing kind of happened with Taisei, and because I wanted to say something happened with Taisei, but off the top of my head, I can't remember if he got injured or not. And same thing with Luca, maybe something popped up as well. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of like self-preservation is kind of a skill, especially when you're going into the Olympic qualification year. And so whether it's due to injury or poor training or poor diet or lifestyle changes, if you're still claiming your priority is to do well going into the Olympics, then all of that stuff comes under the umbrella of athlete management, which is, for most of these athletes, a job they have to do themselves. And there's been a ton of failures, right? The names that we expected to see this time around just aren't here, which is pretty rough.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinatingly different Olympic field compared to the Olympic field that we got last time. Not that there won't be overlap, not that there won't be some of the same names.
Oh yeah, there'll be tons.
But there will be some different names too, and that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Let's finish it up talking about men's lead and just kind of call it after that. I'm pretty sure I guessed Jakob Schubert was my winner. I might have selected Adam as my winner and Jakob as my backup, or vice versa, but I'm pretty sure I said Jakob. So and again, I didn't expect he'd be winning it this way, but what a climb from Jakob. And I thought it was a setup to seeing like, hey, can these guys match him? How close are they going to get? How hard is it going to be to just get beyond the high point that Jakob just set? And that comp, man, we got curtains on that competition so much faster than I expected. I don't even know what to say. So whether you want to talk about Jakob or you want to talk about Toby or Adam or whoever, floor is yours, man.
Yeah, it was kind of like the men's bouldering competition. Like we said, how much was this Mickael winning versus Serrato losing? I think you could sort of have that same logic here, where it's like how much of this was Jakob winning versus how much of it was Andra and Andra and Toby both kind of flubbing there at the end. It almost felt like Jakob just got handed kind of like two winning lottery tickets there at the end, with just how that happened with Andra making it was kind of funny. They probably not funny for Adam, but like ironic, I should say, in that Shauna and Matt were just gushing about how experienced Adam is, and then seconds later, I mean, you couldn't have timed it any better or worse, depending on how facetious you want to be, but moments later, Adam just barn doors off this like kind of elementary mistake. It just goes for a right hand, I think, and he didn't have his toe really hooked into anything, so he just kind of barn doored off, and then they were just like, oh, like sort of basic mistake there, and I think you saw in Andra's face that he knew he had just made a pretty elementary error. And then Toby, who I don't know if we necessarily think about him as the most dynamic climber, but we certainly don't think of him as somebody who like overly struggles on dynamic move. Like he's not like the men's version of Mori or something, or Laura Rigora, right? Like Toby seems pretty capable of doing like basic laches and dynos and stuff, and then he just I don't know, he's kind of another one, kind of like Cheon So in that, maybe in even worse though, he just never really looked settled on this route. Cheon So, right, didn't look settled on the women's route in the final, but kind of found her flow in the head wall. Toby didn't even get a chance because he fell so low, fell on that dyno.
Yeah, the Toby one is somewhat inexplicable, and it's mostly just because the handhold that slipped was facing into the wall, right? And so it's actually really hard to understand like what exactly did just happen. Did we miss something? But it just looks like his hand popped off while trying to wind up for a big lateral dyno, which sucks, but it's because I can't see his hand. Like what exactly did happen there? Did he readjust mid swing, or did he just have a, was it one of the frictionless holds that they just secretly pop back there? I don't know. So that one's hard to evaluate.
Didn't time slow down? It did for me when I was watching it, and his foot or his hand slipped, but he still had those fingers in the pocket. It seemed like he, in my head, like as I'm watching, it seemed like he was hanging from that pocket for days, because I was just like, oh my gosh, is he going to get his feet back on? Like, what is going to happen here? I kind of had this sinking feeling that he wasn't going to be able to recover, because it was
that right hand
points off, right?
Yeah, that right hand was not built to support 3 points off with swinging with that much momentum. It was like, oh, there's no, like, if he had held on to that would have been the moment of the entire World Championships. Like, even if he didn't get anywhere near the top of that climb, if he recovered off a swing like that would just be the highlight reel forever. But it wasn't. And again, that's kind of like talking about expectations, the way you mentioned how Shauna and Matt built up Adam. Like, that's exactly what should happen, right? They should be talking about him as one of the best sport climbers in history, and that's what made this fall so exceptionally stunning, was that they were talking about the same expectations that all of us have for him. He's one of the very best, and it comes down to a little mistake of just not making sure your toe is set before you go for a big reach, and heartbreaking. And I feel a little bit bad for Jakob, because he's got he's friends with these guys, and that's pretty devastating, having to, again, kind of like Jane Kim's win from just a couple weeks ago. How do you manage that attempt to console your friends on really heartbreaking failure that they've had, and at the same time celebrate the fact that you did better than anybody else on this climb? Everybody else failed where you succeeded. That's such a tough balance.
Tough balance, and I feel like there's so much to say about this men's. And another thing that I was surprised about was, let's talk about the performance from Alex Megos, who is another one that I think benefited from the low fall from Toby and the low fall from Andra, right? Because I think, all things being equal, if Andra climbs to his full capability, you don't want to look at a result on if this, but
at least one of those two should have certainly knocked Alex out of the podium.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty logical to think that one of them would have gotten up above 40, which was Alex Megos' final score. I think whether they would have gotten to the 47, 48 territory, who knows, but probably would have gotten on the podium, and they didn't. And so Alex Megos, suddenly, this person that we've always said is kind of like not really we don't think of him as a comp guy. We don't think of him as loving the comp scene. Well, he's a world championship podiumist, if that's a word. And so we have to, just like Petra, just like Mickael, he's got his own complicated performative legacy now in the comp world.
And again, he's podiumed at world championships before, but I think this one isn't one he was expecting. Like, I think that's really what, just seeing who are the people coming out after you and where did I finish. Like, I really doubt that he would have made that in different circumstances, but he did. And I'll be honest, like, I've been one of the guys that's been a little bit rough on Megos, kind of thinking of him as a bit of a carpetbagger, sort of a bit of an opportunist with getting back into competitive climbing when the Olympics came around. But I was honestly actually really charmed by the way he treated his win, but also the press conference afterwards. I thought he brought actually some of the most unfiltered personality and like a sense of humor to it. Jakob, of course, I think Jakob was just lost in a dream. He was just giddy, beyond all recognition. Like, what an incredible win. The fact that you're still winning world championships, like after 10 years of being at world championships. First world championship was 2009 for him. I think 2009 was the first one he did, and he's still there, and he's still super relevant every single time. All the climbers that existed at that first world championship of his are long gone, if not dead in some cases, if off to coaching or whatever. Like, the club is very small, and so the fact that he's still on top is incredible. And then of course Serrato in that press conference is the little, like, lockbox, because he doesn't know what's going on. And some of the actual unintentionally funniest moments, of course, are him trying to answer questions. So if I don't know who the person asking the questions is, I think it's that Richard Ashland, one of the press guys for the IFSC, I think. Sorry if it's not. But he asks a nice long question. Serrato's baffled. Somebody offers a long translation, and then Serrato just gives a yes. And that's it. We're like, well, okay, we did all that for nothing, right? So that was pretty funny. But no, Alex brought the actual the levity to that press conference, and I'm the more I see him around, the more I'm happy to have him here, because I think he's starting to enjoy himself. I think he's starting to like make friends. I think he's starting to understand like how this vibe kind of works within the comp world. I think he's getting more used to it and maybe actually enjoying it for what it is, rather than being there because like, you know, it's an Olympic opportunity. And again, I might be extremely cynical. I'm sure there are people that know him much better. I don't know him at all. There's people that know him and they're going to say I'm completely wrong. I'm just saying what I see, what it feels like as a spectator, the personality he's giving off. I really like how it's developed on screen.
Yeah, and we've talked about how the German team is a young team. All of a sudden, they have a lot of really good talent that's on the younger end, early 20s, late teens. And so this is a chance for Megos to be a mentor, a veteran, and kind of impart some of that wisdom, and maybe he likes that role, right? Maybe he's enjoying the kind of being this newfound elder statesman on the German squad. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's kind of giving, I don't know, like giving some extra pep in his step on the comp scene. Because you're right, he does seem to be enjoying it more so than we've seen in previous seasons.
Yeah, I think just having somebody that's like a clear leader in climbing, not just comp climbing, but in general, it gives their team somebody to rally around a little bit, somebody that, you know, the young guys can come to and believe in, somebody you just act as a flag bearer kind of. It's, you know, who is the spiritual leader of the team. And I think that's a good thing to have. So, yeah. Are there any little things you want to talk about? Anything you want to go into? Because we just crossed an hour, which is definitely longer than we intended, but, you know.
We've kind of touched on a lot of it. I think the only thing I wrote down is I think it now you can say Brooke Rabatou is like definitively the American star, and I think that's kind of interesting because I don't know if you would have said that last season. I think last season you would have said, you know, probably Natalia, and that's not to say Natalia is not a star anymore, but Brooke is just having so far, it's kind of like the comp of her life, right? 3rd place in Boulder, 5th place in lead, and setting herself up really well for the combined portion.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there yet, but I know what you're saying. Like Brooke's certainly been almost the more consistent climber for this year, but for me it does feel like it is like just this year. So I might need a little bit more time to get me there, but I hear what you're saying. If you just started watching climbing in 2023, you probably look at Brooke and say, oh, this is somebody who is more successful. If you only look at this particular season. Yeah, I'd be with you.
What did you make of the moment when Janja, it was like this awkward moment when Janja won the bouldering but it's like she didn't think she had won or something. There was this really weird pause because you remember when Mickael won, even before his attempt was over, he dropped to the mat and there were like strobe lights and then it's like, oh yeah, we still like he's still got time on the clock, and so it's like, and he just like kind of gave another half-hearted attempt or whatever. But when Janja won, there was this kind of strange moment. I don't even know if you remember it, but she fell to the ground and she was like looking over to the side, and the commentators didn't really know what was going on, and the crowd wasn't cheering. It was just this kind of strange few seconds there.
Yeah, of course, the camera cut away from her, which made it hard to tell what was going on the official stream, but Serrato actually posted on his Instagram story from up like his nosebleed seats in the bleachers. He posted a continuous shot of her down on the mats. And I don't know, but I think the most likely thing was just like she wasn't sure yet. Like, you know, maybe she just like needed confirmation. So maybe when she looked that way, she was looking over at a screen. Maybe she was looking at the other climbers trying to just like gauge it. Maybe part of her was like, you know, a lot of jokes in the Plastic Weekly Discord about like her being like, yo, can we start the finals yet? Like, you know, when's this actually going to get going? I couldn't tell you. But
very different from when she swept the bouldering season in 2019, because if you remember there in Vail, she started tearing up like when she was like,
of course, yeah,
holding on to the top hold. Like the celebration began before she even fell to the ground in her own mind. And here she falls to the ground and kind of looks around, and Matt and Sean are like, I think she won. You know, like it's just
Yeah, I don't know.
very awkward.
I think at the same time, she, as much as she did get pretty emotional and she talks about how much she still values wins a lot, it could have also just been, you know, it wasn't as much of a surprise for her. It wasn't as much of a, like, I need this kind of thing. And so maybe it just, like, it took a moment for her to react.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to talk about is Janja and podiums. And of course, you only did it once, but now everybody's begging for a John Burgman hug analysis. So I gotta, like, I gotta ask today when we watch the women's lead final, and the the joke is like the shoulder tap heard around the world on the podium. But of course, there's a bit of a hug over at the chairs. So you gave me some pictures as always. And walk me through it. What do you think?
Okay, well, these are from the Boulder final.
Okay,
the pictures
gotcha.
I gave you, these are from the bouldering final. But let's pop them up on screen here.
Sure.
I think there's some interesting body language. So this is moments after it had been confirmed, just seconds after, really, that it had been confirmed that Janja won. She goes over. I think she's hugging Brooke Rabatou there, who they were the first person that she hugged. They are seemingly friends, I think. It seems like they have a pretty good rapport. So why don't you tell me, what do you see in this hug here?
I mean, I see joy in this hug, you know?
Joy. It's full arms, right? Janja's, she's doing the underclings. Brooke Rabatou's got the around the neck. Just, pure joy, pure joy. Second slide, please. Okay, so this is interesting. This is still Janja and Brooke hugging. They rotate. They swerve, and they're still embraced. And I think the fact that they were able to change angles there and swerve and stay embraced speaks to the continuation of the joy. But you do see Natalya popping her head up there. So Natalya comes into the frame. And I think if you go to the next slide, there's this moment where Natalya's still there, and it's kind of everybody. We've all been in that situation, right? Where you like you're like expected to greet somebody, but they're in conversation, so you're just kind of like, oh, I'll just kind of twiddle my thumbs, because then after Brooke and Janja embraced, they started talking to each other, so they're conversing here. So Natalya's just kind of like, I'm waiting, you know, to do the hug, and then. If you go to the next slide, they hug again. Brooke and Janja, they hug again. This is a double whammy, the double hug. They hug, they talk, they hug. Natalya's still waiting in the wings very politely. If we go to the next hug, finally, Natalya and Janja go to hug. Now, you'll notice a little bit of a, you know, it's like kind of like they're approaching each other, but it's a little more just kind of like the polite hug here. And we'll see in the next, if you go to the next slide, that's not exactly the same joyous embrace, right? It's just kind of the old pat on the back. All credit to them, like we always say, they don't have to hug here.
I think Janja gave her all to Brooke, you know. I think she had nothing left for Natalya,
fatigue.
Frankly. Yeah,
the pump from hugging. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, but they're cordial, right? Natalya very kindly gives like a little pat on the back. Janja turns to commence with the other hugs. That was a pretty brief hug, though. Natalya and Janja's hug it's kind of like blink and you miss it. But then if we go to the next slide,
that's a good one.
That's another one of joy. Look, palming the back there. Janja and Orion, full embrace. I think they're friends as well. That's a great
Orion, though. Orion is also a very a genuine and emotive person. So I imagine when Janja approached Orion was just like full on beaming, if not kind of talking to her already, right? Like, you know. Absolutely.
And let's keep in mind that Orion is still very young. I think Orion like absolutely looks up to Janja, or certainly like, you know, came up through the youth circuit, like looking up to Janja. So this is kind of like someone getting to hug their idol, I think, in a lot of cases. So a lot of joy here in this one. I don't know if I had, that might be and then another hug. This was Mori and Janja embracing. Little did they know that they would battle each other a day later and both reach the top of the lead route. Whether or not that would have changed the joy in this hug, who knows?
And so this hug as well, this hug has a lot of uncertainty here. And I feel like Mori didn't know how to approach this, because we see the right arm is kind of going for an over the shoulder thing, but never actually gets there. And that might partly be because the root setters didn't build Janja appropriately for somebody the size of Mori to hug correctly. So this might be the root setter's fault. It might just be blatant sexism on the root setter's part. But the right hand is up, but not quite there. And then of course the left hand is underneath. So I think there was a lot of indecision about how they were going to approach this one. I think if we got to see Ai's face, it would be complete confusion.
Well, yeah, because this is they're kind of interestingly sort of puzzle pieced together there. Because if you notice, Janja has. It's like Janja's arm is up, and then Ai's arm, and then Janja's arm is below Ai's arm. That does not seem to me like the sort of natural hug. It seems like there's some confusion here. I don't know. Maybe could have been that. I don't know. Maybe Mori wasn't even expecting Janja to come over and give her a hug, or I don't know. Yeah, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, the live comments say, statistical bet says, I think there is a cultural shock permeating this hug.
Could be. It could be.
It could be. It could just be something that doesn't cross borders. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, we're back to Brooke. Yeah.
Yep, back to number one.
So, John, let me ask you, if you're going in for a hug for somebody, are you the one that's going like up and you're like going behind their head over their shoulders? Do you come down around the waist? Are you kind of like the bro hug where it is kind of like diagonal, one hand over the shoulder, one hand going for the butt? You know, like what's your what's your go-to?
Yeah, I'd give the bro hug, because sort of like diagonal, just like a little quick tap on the back. Okay. Unless I know the person, then it might be a little like momentarily longer embrace. I think you and I gave each other a pretty big hug when we finally met in person. Probably the good old bro hug.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Yeah,
it's a good starting point. Maybe I might even start with just like, give me some knuckles, right? And if that goes well, then it's like, all right, then let's hug.
I do the knuckles, but I fake them out and then grab them by the forearm and just like pull them. Yeah, I'm a bit of a hugger.
There you go. Yeah, you're a martial artist.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for the hug analysis, man. And I don't have a lot else to add aside from that. The final ranking for the combined stuff, I don't think has been published yet officially. There's somebody in the Discord, Kla, who has put together their own prospective ranking, who they think is going to make top 20. I know the comp climbing subreddit has built their own too. So I think everybody's figured out like who the top 20 are going to be for the men and women. What are you more excited about going into this weekend? Are you excited about the speed or the combined?
Oh, wow.
What do you just look forward to? Is there one of those where you're just like, I can't wait?
I'll tell you, here's the answer to go on everything that we're just talked about. I want to see Janja Garnbret and Mori battle again, and I want to get a definitive winner. Now, granted, like, since we're doing the combined discipline, it's like there's still going to be wiggle room for like, but it's like the combined score and all this. But yeah, I'm excited to see. And I hope we get to see Janja Garnbret and Mori battle again. That's what I'm most excited for.
People are saying that the IFSC did post the rankings in their Instagram story. Yeah, they did. And it looks about what everybody was saying online. So good job to all the people with calculators. You nailed it. Thumbs up. Honestly, I'm looking forward to Speedway more because watching combined is going to be a slog, man. It's going to be an entire weekend of really long days watching climbing. And like you said, there is a lack of satisfaction from, whether I wins or Janja wins. We're going to lose the sub results of lead or of boulder to the ether. And it's just going to be who's a better combined athlete. And like I always say, combined is not a real discipline. There's no use in comparing a combined result from this year to comparing it to 4 years ago, to comparing it to 4 years before that. It's just like this fleeting thing that's never going to exist again. So I will be happy to see them climb again. But Janja's going to beat I in bouldering. And then it's a toss-up who wins in lead. And I'm not sure it's going to do anything to resolve anything for me. And I don't know it's going to progress the story any further. So for the sake that speed is a lot more brief and because the big stories that I'm looking forward to for combined are going to be kind of tough to parse from this format. I'm definitely looking forward to speed more.
Speed's it's gonna be a banger for sure. I think we're gonna get it's like because the speed we've kind of been on pause a little bit with the speed with the World Cup and stuff. So finally we're gonna get them back. Meaning like we're gonna get like
Everybody.
the big names, like right? Yeah, the superstars are here. Hopefully they're healthy. We'll see. Like we know that at the end of these speed World Cups, some people were battling some injuries and stuff. I think Kiermaier was injured and. So hopefully everybody's 100%. Even if they weren't, I don't know if we would know that necessarily. It might keep that kind of close to the vest. But yeah, speed's going to be awesome. It's going to be really cool.
It should be a good one. Let's call it there. If you happen to watch this live, thanks for hanging out while we tried to remember like how to do a live broadcast on YouTube, but it looks like it worked out okay, so that's awesome. There will be another debrief after the combined, and we're going to have some guests. I'm looking forward to that. Liv Egley and a transparent hold will be our two surprise guests for the
a transparent hold. That's very I don't know, like metaphysical of you. We're just going to have a transparent hold, and we're going to be talking.
This series has jumped the shark. Let's be honest. We've gotten to that point where it's just absolute, like, we're getting to absurdity to make this entertaining. But yeah, so we'll be back next weekend. Of course, if you want to hang out, hop in the Discord to chat. We love having everybody that's there. Sorry that this wasn't shorter. I thought it was going to be a short episode, but of course you can't stop us from talking about climbing. So we'll just cut it there. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, join the Discord, support on Patreon. Otherwise, enjoy the climate. We'll see you next week on the next